So the next step of the process here is getting a vibe going for the bass so that I can jam along, come up with a cool bass line, finish the groove so we can get into the good stuff, which is the climax, getting the hooks going, the vocals, the synths, and all that good stuff. All right, so basically in the first video, what I talked about was syncopation. I was saying how after we get the basic beat, what we need to do is introduce some syncopation, because syncopation introduces groove, it keeps the beat interesting, and it keeps people dancing because it's groovy. All right, now Wikipedia actually has a really good entry on syncopation. The placement of a rhythmic stress or accent where they wouldn't normally occur. Now, if you're in a house beat, the stresses and accents are going to be on the beats and the off beats. So the kick and the clap, they accent the beats, and the open hats, they accent the off beats. And so that's where the stresses and accents would normally occur in a house beat, on the beats and the off beats. And so we need a placement of rhythmical stress or accent where they wouldn't normally occur. Okay, so that's when you introduce those sorts of things, that's going to be syncopation. Here's another good description of it. It's a disturbance. Syncopation is a disturbance or interruption of the regular flow of rhythm. And so a house beat has a regular flow of rhythm, right? It's just kick, clap, open hat, over and over and over, right? Or I guess kick, open hat, clap, open hat, over and over and over. But anyway, it has a regular flow of rhythm. So anytime you introduce a disturbance or an interruption in there, it's going to create a syncopated feel, okay? And that is going to be more interesting, and it's going to make things groovier. And so in practice, what does that look like? Well, it's really easy, okay? 90% of the time, to get a vibe going, to jam out something for the bass, what I'll do is I'll just start going through some drum loops, right? Most people, I think, work this way. And so if I just, for example, type in like tops, check this out, okay? So let's listen to this. Okay, so initially, this seems to be some kind of syncopated element, but it just plays over and over and over again. So it actually becomes part of the regular flow of the rhythm. And so your brain just kind of tunes it out after a while. And so that's cool. That's a good starting point. But what we could do is maybe just spice it up a little bit. So I'm going to take this guy and, I don't know, maybe we'll put him over here. And then I'm going to reconsolidate all this. And then let's open this up and just get rid of everything but the kind of syncopated hits. And then let's reconsolidate this just so we only have the kind of off hits like that. So check this out. So you've definitely heard that before, right? Those are the syncopated elements because they're disturbing the regular flow. Here's the regular flow. Right? And then here's like the cool parts that make it a little bit more groovy. Okay, and you can see that they're also accenting things that are not regularly accented. So here are the open hats. Let me open up a clap and then the kicks right here. So the kicks are playing every beat, right? And then here the claps are playing on the second and the fourth beat. And then the open hats are playing on the off beats right here. But this guy is not playing on the off beat or on the beat. Okay, it's kind of playing in between them. So here's an off beat right here. And then here's a beat. And this is playing on the 16th note before the strong beat here. Now, of course, you can create a MIDI clip and then drag in this guy right here into the MIDI track and create a little simpler instrument, come in here, just kind of isolate this hit right here, and then come up and program your own kind of syncopated pattern. But I find it a much faster way to work, and actually a much more inspiring way to work, actually just going through drum loops. And it's funny, people will make fun of people that use drum loops, but I find it fast, I find it efficient, and I find it inspiring. That's actually not how I'm going to work in this video because PAWSA is interesting. He doesn't really use these kinds of drum loops and stuff to create the syncopated groovy vibe. It actually usually comes from the hooks, like the bass itself, or from the vocals or something like that. Yes, he'll every now and then throw in like a little snare in there, but the beats tend to be very straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit to the climax section of the kind of workflow here and go find a vocal that I can kind of vibe to and write the bass line off of. And hopefully I can find a strong vocal because then it can serve as kind of one of the main hooks. But I'm going to go look for some things and I'll come back when I have it. Cool, so I have this vocal right here, Move Your Feet by the 49ers, and I like this part of the vocal right here. Check this out. And then she repeats that, right here, which is really cool. So check this out. Slight variation on the lyrics, though.
Hold it on, hold it on, hold it on right now.
Very cool. And so that's cool for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that it kind of mimics, or I can kind of mimic the structure of the vocal hook in the PAWSA track. And so what he does in the first kind of drop part, in the climactic kind of drop, like right here, he has a little phrase right here that plays, I like the way you work it. And so it goes phrase A, and then he repeats phrase A with a little bit of filtering and some distortion, and then the exact same pattern happens again with another phrase from the vocal, but it's singing the same melody, just different lyrics, and again he repeats that with a little bit of variation. And so it's cool because we kind of almost have this back and forth call response kind of thing here with the unprocessed vocal and then the processed vocal. But then we get this back and forth between this kind of little section and then this separate phrase that has a variation in the lyrics. And then this just kind of continues on for a while. It's really cool. It just keeps it really interesting for over a long period of time. And so I can kind of do something a little bit similar with his vocal. So I was excited when I found this. But this vocal is a little bit longer than PAWSA's. So I think it'll be a little bit boring if I kind of repeat it with the filtering and then go to the B phrase and then repeat the B phrase with some filtering. So I think I'm just going to run these back to back and then maybe have a little bit of filtering on one of them. But again, see, I'm getting way ahead of myself. I'm thinking about what's going to happen in the climax. But again, all I'm trying to do right now is get a vibe to write the bass line. But you can see, like, just going out and looking for things, I'm going to keep notes of what I want to do here, just so further down the line I know that I can try certain things. Another thing that's really cool that PAWSA does that I should definitely bring up is that instead of really relying on one vocal hook, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves sometimes to go out and find the perfect vocal or something like that. But PAWSA has this really interesting workaround. I'm not sure if he does it consciously or not, but instead of relying on one vocal hook, what he'll do is rely on one kind of theme. And he'll go out and find a bunch of little catchy vocals that center around this theme. And so instead of having to put all the pressure of the track onto the strength of one vocal, what you can do instead is have all these cool little vocals around a theme vary over time, and that actually kind of becomes the hook. That's what keeps the track exciting over time. So it's a really cool thing because you could just find all these little things, throw them in the session, not working haphazardly like that, but it makes things a lot easier, and it takes kind of some of the pressure off of having to find that perfect kind of vocal. Now, the theme has to be something that the club goers or the people in the club are going to give a shit about, right? And so he usually names his tracks after the theme. So work, right? So I like the way you work. And that just is the core theme throughout the whole track. And then he'll have a track like Crazy and a bunch of other tracks. You could check it out. Okay. And so there's a lot of reasons why I was excited about this vocal. I was looking for a theme centered around like right now, like committing to the moment. And that's how I kind of came across this vocal, because she says right now. And I was looking for vocals that had those lyrics, and I came across this one. So, yeah, a couple things there. And what I want to do now is let's just go ahead and get this vocal in time and try to make it work so we can write the bass line. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new audio track here. And I'm going to bring this guy down here. Let's give ourselves a little bit of room and move this vocal over here. Get this guy a little bit closer too. But so what we need to do is I'm going to put this on. Now, obviously, what you could do is you can go look up the BPM of the track. Okay, but just in case you can't find it, this is better just to know what you're doing. And so I'm going to show you a way that you can figure out the BPM. It's pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click and click on warp, and I'm going to change this to complex because complex works really well with vocals. It works with complex source material. And so all I have to do now is change the segment BPM. Now, the way that this works is that you need to set the segment BPM, because then Ableton will say, okay, well, the segment BPM of here is, for example, 124. The BPM of the track is 127, so we need to do the calculation to make sure that this is in time with the track. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just change the segment BPM until it lines up properly. Now, we can see that Wanna Go right here. Whoops, let's turn this vocal off. Wanna Go. And this is Wanna Go right here too. Okay, so that should probably be lined up on the beat. So this is probably at a slower tempo than our track. So I'm probably gonna start turning the segment BPM down. Let's start checking it out. Okay, cool. So that's that. And so what I can do is just move this guy over now. So maybe something like this. Now there's a little bit of want to go, and so that kind of would rather start a little bit early here because you're kind of swooping into the words. But same thing. What I could do is just change this to warp complex, and we can go to 120.5. Let's cut this out, and then there we go. And let's see if this is about right. Let's check this out. So I'm going to go ahead and consolidate this because you can see how much crap I have to work with. So I'm going to consolidate this so it's just easier. And then we can just fine tune this a little bit. I'm going to change this back to complex. And so here we go. That's definitely going to go on. This is going to go on. So let's check this out. I'm just going to cycle around here. Let's go on. Now, I'm going to do as little as possible because I want it to still feel organic and stuff. I don't want it to feel like it's too rigid. I definitely want to place the vocals on beat and get them in as in pocket as possible, but I don't want to do too much. That sounds pretty good to me, so I'm happy with that. Now let's go ahead and fix this guy. And so that's it. Like that sounds pretty good to me. It's in time. So these guys are good to go. And the next thing we got to do is get them in tune. The dreaded music theory. It's not that bad, okay? I'm going to show you a way that's very simple. Now, and actually gives you more flexibility than you think. Now, the question is we have the vocals, and what are we going to tune them to? So we have the kick. That's like the only other element here that we can tune to. Now, would I rather tune my vocals to the kick, or would I rather tune my kick to the vocals? Now, I would rather tune my vocals to the kick. I've selected the kick based off of the way that I like it sound, and so if I transpose the kick, it's going to completely change the sound. So I want to keep the kick the way it is. And so we have to figure out what the pitch of the kick is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to freeze the kick, because sometimes kicks are a little bit of a pain to figure out what the pitch is, if it even has a pitch. And I should let you know that some producers don't even tune their kicks to their bass. Now, I'm going to, because I want to play it safe. I can only use my headphones, and I can only use my mix cubes. Those are the only two monitors that I use. Now, I have much larger monitors, but I can't use it because I'm in an apartment and I get noise complaints sometimes. So I'd rather play it safe, because if there's something wrong going on at the low end that I can't hear, it's going to be magnified in the club. And so I'd rather just play it safe and make sure that everything is in the same key. Okay, so let's figure out what the key of the, or not what the key of the kick is, what the pitch of the kick is. So I'm going to just drag this guy down right here. And let me show you this. I'm just going to consolidate it to keep it easy. And then let's just loop around. Okay, now what you could do is just go ahead and open up the spectrum analyzer. Okay, so check this out. So obviously what you want to do is look at the peak of the fundamental right here. And so it looks like it's a C, okay? Now, if you watch the kick synthesis video that I made, you'll know that sometimes kicks will have a slower pitch envelope. And so sometimes it's actually difficult to see what the peak of the fundamental is, because it just rolls down. But this one's pretty easy. It's probably a C. But just in case it's a little bit difficult, what you could do is transpose the kick. I'm going to turn warp off here. And that way, when I transpose it, I'm going to hold down shift and press up on the transposition here. And you'll see, look in the arrangement window as I do this, you'll see that the kick like halves its value. Okay, it's like, this is the way that a sampler, for example, will transpose things. This is the way that actually that a DJ equipment will transpose things. You change the pitch parameters so that you can increase or decrease the BPM. Okay, and so if you transpose something by 12 semitones, you're speeding it up by double the speed. Or if, in other words, if you double the speed of something, you're actually leaping the entire thing up 1 octave. Okay, so that's how this works. So what I could do is now play this back, and I could check to see if it's still a C, and we can look right here, it is. And then if it's still hard, you can transpose it up an octave again. So holding down shift, transposing it up 24 semitones, because there's 12 semitones per octave. So transposing it 24 semitones is 2 octaves. So if we come and check this out, over here again on the master, okay. Again, it's the C, right? So there we go. This is definitively a C. So what key can we use? Okay, so I'm going to give you a way that you could figure this out. I'm just going to keep it simple here. But whatever key we end up using, that's what we're going to transpose the vocals to. So this is a very safe way to go. If you have a kick with a pitch of C, what you want to do is you want to have the pitch of the kick either serve as the first note in the scale or the 5th note in the scale. Okay, if you go with either of those options, that's a very safe way to go. And so what keys can we choose then? Well, we need to choose a key where the kick is the first note in the scale. So what key has C as the first note in the scale? Well, C minor. Now, minor because 99.9% of dance tracks are in a minor key. So we're just going to take that as a given. So we can choose C minor, okay, because C, the kick is going to serve as the first note in the scale. Now we could choose a second option, okay? What's the second option? The second key we can choose is where C serves as the 5th note in the scale. And so what key would that be? Well, that would be F minor. Now, how do I know that? Let me show you something really quick, okay? So if we get this MIDI, I said the kick can serve as the first note in the scale or the 5th note in the scale. So for example, if we're in C minor, we can have a kick that plays C or G, okay? We can have a kick that plays the first note in the scale, or we can have a kick that plays the 5th note in the scale. The 5th note in the scale of C minor is G, okay? C, D, E, F, G, okay? Number 5. Okay, so obviously in our case, we have a kick with a pitch of C, and so we would obviously have a kick playing this note right here. But the question is, well, what scale has C as the 5th? So all you need to do is just choose this, and let's move the 5th here, because this is an interval of a perfect 5th here. And let's just move this down until this note right here is playing a C, and we'll see what the first note in the scale is. Does that make sense? I hope so. So there you go. We moved it down to C, and so what scale are we in? Oh, we're in F minor, okay? And so that's how you know that, because like I said, the kick can play either the first note or the 5th note in the scale. And so when C is the 5th note in the scale, we're in the key of F minor. And so right here on the vocal, I'm just going to change this to Vox, and I'm going to be like C minor or F minor. Okay. Now I want to, just like the timing, I don't want to move this around too much. And that's kind of the advantage of giving yourself different key options. Because if you have different key options, then you don't actually have to transpose the vocal very much or any further than you might want to. Let's figure out what the key of the vocal is, and then we could figure out how far we have to actually transpose the vocal. Now there's tons of ways to figure out what the key of a vocal is. You'll see some YouTube videos saying just pitch it around until it sounds good. Why not? That's a good way to do it. Another one is to just jam out on like a keyboard or something. And so if I just go get M1, let's get this up so you can see what's going on a little bit. So wanna go, right? So there you go. Wanna go. See, so you can figure it out that way, okay? But then you can see that, well, let's try one of these chords right here. Like, let's try the G minor chord. And so that works. So it's probably in G minor, okay? Now that's one way, just kind of doing it by ear. That's not how I would do it. I would know immediately looking at the spectrum analyzer what the key of the track is. And so it's nice to maybe land luckily on something, but it's also better to just simply know what you're doing so you could immediately figure out what's going on. And so when I look at the spectrum analyzer, for example, wanna. So I know that this is A sharp to A. Now, if you're playing in a standard key, say a major or minor key, you're never going to have A sharp and A next to each other. You'll have a B flat. So A sharp and B flat are the same thing. They're called enharmonic equivalents, but that is way too advanced here. So you're going to have B flat to A. So all I'm telling you is that this is B flat to A. Wanna go, and we know that it goes down to G. And so what she's doing, I know, is that she's going B flat, A, and G. That's called scalar motion because she's just moving down the G minor scale. The G minor scale is G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F, and then G. Okay, now I know that just from working on this a lot, and G minor is actually one of the most popular keys in tech house because G, the kick of G, if it has a pitch of G, is 49 hertz. That's right at 50 hertz, which sounds amazing on club systems. You don't want to go too much lower. And so F and G, those are really good places to be. But I know, for example, she's singing B flat, A, G. Those are the first three notes in the minor key, in G minor. Now, I also know certain melodic patterns. Vocals will tend to move towards the tonic, or they're going to move away from the tonic. When they move towards the tonic, they're resolving tension. Okay, they start out from away from the tonic, and the tonic is the first note in the scale. So if we're in G minor, the tonic is G. So vocals will typically move towards the first note in the scale. If a vocal starts out away from the tonic, that creates tension because the tonic is the home of the key. And so it's like being far away from home, right? And so as you work towards home, as you get closer to home after being on vacation, it feels good. You're like, I just want to get home, right? So that's kind of how the emotion is with vocals. So if you're moving towards the tonic, you're moving towards resolution. If you're moving away from the tonic, you're creating tension. Now what she's doing is she's moving towards the tonic. See how it just feels like it lands nicely when it lands on the go? Wanna go. Okay, and then so wanna go right now. Then she moves away from the tonic again. She moves to the second scale degree. The second scale degree is, as you can imagine, the second note in the scale of G minor. So A. See, so there's the A. Okay, so she's moving up to that second scale degree. And so that creates tension. Again, she's moving away, but in particular, the second scale degree has a lot of tension because it's so close to the tonic. Okay, and so it really wants to move back towards the tonic. So this phrase is really cool because what it has is several phrases that kind of internally resolve. They start out away from the tonic and move into the tonic, start away from the tonic, move into the tonic, start away from the tonic, move into the tonic. So there's three phrases almost of internal resolution. And then it moves out into a tension tone, the second scale degree. And so this phrase kind of resolves, and then is unresolved, creates instability and tension, and that creates forward momentum into the next phrase. But all this to say that how do I know just immediately by looking, for example, at a spectrum analyzer, what key we're in? Well, first, I know what the scale of G minor is. Okay, and so it's G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F. Okay, and second, I know the general patterns of what melody to do. They're going to be moving towards the tonic or away from the tonic. Towards the tonic for resolution, away from the tonic for tension. And so, I know that. I know that as she's going from B flat, A down to G, she's moving towards the tonic, and she's finally landing on G every time she says go. All right, and then so finally, I also know the general interval relationships between the notes of the minor scale. So let's kind of write this out a little bit. So right here, the minor scale formula, it doesn't matter what key you're in. If you're playing a minor key, a natural minor key technically, if you're playing in a natural minor scale, it's going to follow the same pattern. You're going to have, this is the minor scale formula. It's whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. So for example, if we're in G minor, right, this is going to be G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, and F. So what this formula tells you is the distances between these different notes. So to get from G to A, okay, let's actually pull up a piano. To get from G to A, is a whole step. So here's G, here's A. Now a whole step is two semitones, so we have to go 1, 2. See that? So we need to move, if we're going to flesh out the G minor scale, we start on G and we follow the formula. So to get to the next note, we start on G, we go a whole step. So 1, 2. To get to the next note, we go a half step, as we can see. So whole step, half step. So G, and then we go up to A, so whole step, then a half step to B flat, then we go another whole step, okay, and that's to C. Then we go another whole step, that's to D. Then we go a half step, that's E flat, and then we go a whole step to F, and then we go a whole step back to G. Okay, and so we get these exact notes. Now let's do another one, okay? So let's figure out what A minor is. Now you should know what the scale of A minor is. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, okay? Couldn't be simpler, it's all the white keys. So let's see if we can get A, B, C, D, E, F, G using the minor scale formula. Okay, so this scale formula lets you figure out what the notes are for any minor scale. It doesn't matter where you start on. Okay, so that's useful information. Okay, so for example, that's how I know that the vocal was going B flat, A, and then down to G, and those are the first three notes of the G minor scale, but they also follow the formula, which is half step down to A and then whole step down to G. Okay, so that's again just a more general knowledge of how I would know that this is in G minor. Okay, but let's do A. Okay, so we start out on A, obviously. So then we go a whole step up from A. So here's A, and we go a whole step up, and we land on B. Awesome. Okay, and then from B we go a half step up. So here's B, we go a half step up, we land on C. So there's C. And then from C, we go a whole step, and we go from C to D. That gets us the next note. And then from D, we go another whole step up. So here's D, and then we go a whole step up that lands on E. Okay. And then from E, we go a half step up. And so from E, we go to F, and that gives us the next note in the scale. And then from F, we go a whole step up. And then so from F, we go a whole step, we land on G. Okay. And then finally from G, we go a whole step up to complete the circle. So from G, we land back on A. And so you could see that minor scales are all the same. It's all the same interval relationships. And so it's really independent of whatever key. So if you decide, for example, you're in C minor, you can very easily figure out what the notes of the C minor scale are by using the minor scale formula. And so this is good just general knowledge because you could see the movement of a melody and know, okay, well, it's moving down a half step, down a whole step. And so if you know the minor scale formula, you'll know, okay, well, then we're probably in C minor or G minor, A minor, F minor, whatever. And just to show you again in the spectrum analyzer, the movement of the vocal. So we see we're going from A sharp down to A, or technically B flat down to A. So we know that that is a half step, okay? So wanna, and then where does she go? Well, we know she goes down to the G, okay? So we know then from A to G, that's a whole step. And so I know just from looking at here, she's going from B flat to A, that's a half step, then from A down to G. I know that she's following this pattern right here. And I also know she's moving towards the tonic. As I mentioned earlier, vocals will tend to move towards the tonic or away from the tonic. In this case, she's moving towards the tonic, so I know that she's singing this part of the scale. So if she's singing this part of the minor scale formula, then I know she's singing this right here. So this tells me again that she is in G minor. So if you have any questions about that stuff, or if you need further development on these ideas, let me know and I'll make a more comprehensive music theory tutorial. But again, I think it's good to know what you're doing. Of course, you could just jam out and maybe find the key, but I would know within 3 seconds of looking at the spectrum analyzer that she's in G minor. Okay? So now that we know she's in G minor, what we could do is move her into key. The question again we have over here, C minor or F minor. Now what I said is I don't want to transpose the vocal too much. I don't want to transpose it any more than I have to. And so G minor, is it closer to F minor or C minor? Okay, well, let's just look at a piano really quick for those that aren't familiar. So here's G and here's F. Okay, here's G and here's C. So obviously moving the vocal down 2 semitones is a lot closer than having to move it up all the way over here, up 5 semitones. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to move this to F. So I'm gonna come in here and just move this down 2, and so let's check this out. Okay, let's move this down 2 as well. Cool, and then so it's not going to sound any different. It's not going to sound any better, really. But the reason why I'm doing this now is because, like I said, we're working towards writing the bass line, and I need the bass to be in tune with the kick. And so if I'm going to be writing a bass line, well, it makes more sense to actually start out playing in the right key for the bass line. And so that's why I'm setting up the right key here in the vocals. And so that way, when I start writing the bass line, we've now chosen the track to be F minor. So we'll go ahead and write bass and then F minor. And so I'm going to write in the key of F minor. And so that's going to work with the kick. And it's also going to now work with the vocals. So all three of these elements are going to be in tune with each other. One thing before we move on into the bass is I want to just talk about complex versus complex pro. Now, complex pro is cool because if you pitch a vocal, what this formant slider will do here is try to preserve, or at least give you the option to try to preserve the original tone of the vocal. So this is actually much easier to show you if we transpose the vocal up. So let's transpose it up by 3 semitones. Okay, just an arbitrary number. And if we listen back here, if we have the formant at 100, what Ableton tries to do is preserve the original tone of the vocal. If we bring the formant all the way down to 0, it does not try to preserve the original tone of the vocal. It just pitches it up and it makes it sound like a chipmunk in this case. So if I turn this up, see how that sounds much more faithful to the original? If we bring this down to transpose at 0 semitones, let's move it up 3 semitones with formant at 100%. Yes, it still sounds a little bit higher, but it doesn't sound as high as this. Watch. Okay, and so the same thing happens when we move it down. That's what Complex Pro does. It gives you this continuum kind of to try to find a tone that works with whatever pitching that you're doing, which is really cool. A lot of options here to change the tone of the vocal. And so here, this is trying to preserve the original tone. Okay, and then this is not preserving the tone. And so when you have it down to 0, that's exactly the same thing as complex. Okay, so complex just simply doesn't give you the option to try to preserve the original tone or timbre of the vocal. And so when we come to Complex Pro, again, we have the option of trying to preserve the original vocal, or screw trying to preserve the original vocal. It just gives us different tone options. We can just go through here and try to find something that sounds cool. Okay, and so that's what I'm going to try to do. Let's try to find something that sounds cool. But you know what? I like it at 0, okay? It just sounds cleaner to me. And so that's the same thing as complex, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it on complex. And there we go. I just wanted to point that out because you can get a lot of cool tones actually typically from Complex Pro. It's actually rare that I don't use it when I'm pitching something, but in this case, it just seems to work.